Yeah, I'm as shocked as you guys are to see that a unit like this even exists in anyone's barracks, but I guess they do. So that's what we'll watch and that's what we'll review in today's video. Stuff like this. A literal microwave.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, if you didn't see it, I'm basically putting together a monthly series of my community's most invested and most proud of heroes in Fire Emblem Heroes. You could consider this somewhat like a hero review, which I haven't really done in a long time, but I really wanted to see, considering there's like 600 to 700 characters or heroes in this game plus, and what people are genuinely using in today's game, what they're investing in, what they choose to use. And it's a nice way for me to like review those characters, give my thoughts on them, maybe advise some better options if there are. There's not always a best build, but I wanted to take a moment to appreciate some of the characters that my community does put together. If you want to know exactly whose these are or like where they've been sourced from, my Patreon, go check that out in the description below, and my Discord by linking through Patreon. You can get on there and see exactly where these come from and how dedicated some of these are. I gotta say, I'm actually like blown away by the amount of submissions I had, and I can't cover all of them. I want to, but this video would genuinely be so long if I went through all of them. So really do appreciate those of you that did get involved in this. And for those of you that are not, again, consider supporting the content if you want to through Patreon. And for the next submission, you'll definitely get through that, I hope, or submit your own. One thing I want to mention for those that aren't also part of this, you can also use it as a sort of way to get ideas on your own character builds, or, maybe it's just a character that you were doubtful that wouldn't work, but clearly, these are working, people are using them, and I gotta commend them for it. So without further ado, before we get started, smash the like button, sub if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments below what you think of these character builds, or don't think of them, I suppose. There's a few here. I wish I could cover more, but I'll do who I can. So as you can see to my left, this is the first submission that I picked. I picked a few that I feel would make good for the length for this video by Like Ike. That's a fitting name considering who we're reviewing here. And as you can see, the +10 Brave Ike with Lancina standard combination. So yes, this does exist in today's game, but if somebody with Bike hits you, it's probably because they actually really like Bike or Ike and they really want to use their favorite character, and that's totally okay. Actually, Bike himself hasn't, I wouldn't call him as good as he used to be, because now there's more damage piercing type of specials, a lot of really solid red units like Legendary Sigurd, Dual Sigurd, Dual Lift and such that are way more oppressive and give Bike a hard time. So it's still not the easiest experience to use like a green tank, but Brave Ike is going to be one of the best to do so. The build itself, as expected, no follow-up, stacking speed, so you don't get basically killed by hardy bearing fast users that disable his reverse desperation effect. And by using null follow-up, you can make sure that those characters don't double you and get like double trade where they hit you, you hit back, and then they hit, and then they get that full damage on him. With speed stacking, you avoid that completely. Now with locked teams, you can actually run null follow-up on one and null C-disrupt Bike on another, which really lends itself to giving you variety in teams. Bike is still a solid tank, guys, and you might want to give him a shot, especially with the locked feature. Next up on my list here is a submission by Beth. So we have George, and that's it. That's basically the arena build for George, which works, I would say, wonders considering how many oppressive type of legendaries there are, and just units in general, that someone like George really fits well into the metaphor. So this is like a Deadeye build, times pulse, null follow-up, sturdy stance. Enemy phase clean kills many current meta units, and that's why I honestly would recommend someone like George over something like Summer Norn, because he just costs less in total grails. He has a supportive weapon even if he's doing literally nothing, can use Deadeye, and is generally like good in like most content right now. So For like what was essentially a meme, we got a pretty flexible, pretty solid unit for a pretty low cost. And as a blue, he's one of the best ones to invest into. Thank you for the submission. Next up is Micaiah, submitted by none other than Emu. So I believe he said that he's using this to basically counter a lot of those really annoying armor units because of her auto follow-up plus wind sweep effect, and because of that she basically can double through many things. So if you run into far save armors that aren't named Brave Hector, but even if it is Brave Hector, she'll still get 2 shots against him, which may not kill, but will do a lot of damage, and basically every other armor dies. So if you put together one team slot dedicated just to counter those annoying armors on teams, or just try to cut through far save in general, she's going to do really solid for that purpose alone. You don't always have to use her as a carry, you don't even have to use her as anti-cav. There's just a different creative way of using Micaiah's auto follow-up, for great stat spread, and just general counter to stuff like armors and calves, which is still great in today's game. Next up is, well, not really a surprise, but it is Fallen Edelgard, but a slightly different way. And I think I did mention this on the release of Fallen Edelgard, that you might want to sub out the B slot for Wings of Mercy, give her Heavy Blade instead, and this is exactly that. So by being able to do that, you can essentially use her for a nice follow-up from across the map and still get your triple action off with Heavy Blade. Because honestly, her stat spread is going to get that Heavy Blade check almost always. The big difference between keeping her B skill and changing it to Wings of Mercy is, of course, that you don't get that 40% damage reduction and healing. That's the trade-off, but if you're not really planning to enemy phase and you're strictly using her for Gale Force potential, then this is a really, really, really good way to use her. Submitted by Just Nor. Thank you so much, my man. Fallen Edelgard is still pretty relevant, but my experience with her isn't that she's great at tanking, but the fact that she runs that triple action, she's okay at tanking, but people have really like caught on to that sort of thing, and I feel have created counters for her. But as a Gale Force unit, she is going to be top of the line. All right. And we have our very first meme. That is literally far save fodder. And Wyvern decided, Silver W, decided to submit this as a way of saying, hey, I got a Henriette that I'm planning to fodder for far save, and you probably should too if you want to acknowledge how powerful of a skill that is. Yeah. Next time he'll probably submit a real unit, but I wanted to give it an acknowledgement of how powerful far save is, and that IS would break their Hero Fest rules just to bring Henriette in so that people would summon her for fodder, and it seems like that mission is accomplished. Next up is the microwave herself, Momori. Literally microwave and idol. I just realized that's literally her title. Oh my. Okay. Anyways, if you forgot what Momori does, her weapon is below me. It's basically a worry fighter effect with extra stats, as long as she's within 2 spaces of an ally, which ideally she probably will be, considering this particular Momori build uses near save. It's a +10 version that got 4-mud, submitted by MK, aka Meta Knight, who dominated Brawl. But anyways, yeah, so she is very solid when it comes to stat spread. This variation tends to bump up her speed as opposed to dumping it by using the Ivy. That's a creative take on it. But considering there's a Vengeful and Quick Repose stack there, that does mean she beats basically all impact effects, or just people who try to deny her follow-up, and uses that to beat them. Still weak to null follow-up, of course, but as a green near save unit, this is a slightly different way of doing it, and I'm sure it's quite competitive with, you know, save Brave Edelgard doing near save. So I don't see her failing at all in this particular role. Just not someone that first comes to mind. I honestly forgot she existed until we got this submission. Next up is a brand new pirate used in a very, very highly invested way, which is Vika. Now, she does actually work pretty well as a Gale Force unit, and I believe Tristan, who submitted this, says that he combines her with Valoria, which is a great way to do it. So you make your Gale Force procs very consistent. The thing is that she reduces stats pretty easily amongst all enemies by just the nature of her weapon, and then that makes her condition to meet heavy blade quite good. She's got the standard flyer mobility of 3, like flyer beast mobility of 3 movement, and then being able to traverse any terrain, which makes her pretty good, and she's colorless for those neutral matchups. I am a fan of Vika. I just wish she wasn't a 4-star focus, because like on the seasonal, because that cost of orbs is kind of oof. If she was a demote, that would have been way better, but that's not the case, and therefore I can't really see it worth the orb investment, especially with some one-offs being something like Pirate Tibarn, or even Pirate Nisala to a lesser extent, I guess. Not a huge fan of him, but it's definitely something to think about. Nonetheless, as a favorite and someone who's basically highly invested here, this is a solid unit. Next up is Corrin, submitted by Marilena. So again, I kind of forgot the OG Corrin existed. It goes to show you how much I'm using Legendary Corrin and literally think that's that's her only copy or version. And even Fallen Corrin exists now that I'm reminded of this. But essentially, that's Saizo's weapon with the like threaten kind of aspect, threaten attack speed. So, and she has that adaptive damage of all dragons. I don't know what to think of Corrin in general, just because stuff like null penalties or nullifying penalties does exist on a couple of units, and she may completely fall off any sort of threat if she does encounter those sort of things, considering she has 49 attack stat. That is held up quite a bit by the fact that there is adaptive damage, and of course if she's able to buff herself, or just straight up, you know, by taking the penalties of others, being able to pump herself up, that would make her a solid tank and likely to get much more kills if you proc the blue flame as shown here. So I'm not sure if the Dark Blessing is in line there, but this is definitely some sort of arena build, if nothing else, or possibly a carry build in Light, I think. Light or Astro Season. Either way, I could see her working, especially if you support her with the right stuff. But it's definitely more of a unit that I forgot existed, but I do respect that someone like Marilena does use Corrin, the OG one, of course. To no one's surprise, we do have a Reinhardt here, but it is a very, very, very high investment Reinhardt used in AR offense. And as someone who's been actively using Reinhardt as a hit and run for AR offense, I do appreciate this, but this is a very good way to do it, considering there's Far Trace. Now, his weapon is literally -5 speed, unit initiate combat, unit attacks twice. This goes to show you how old that weapon really is below me. Conk submits this because he does believe in it quite strongly, combined with Elwood, and honestly, it's really good, because if you're able to just smite in Reinhardt, and he doesn't have to use any of his movement to get into a position, you essentially can do a very powerful hit and run that doesn't require a dancer. I believe trace skills are very strong in the current game, but they're so limited by seasonals that I just can't, like, it hurts to not be able to use those sort of things and have to rely on stuff like Regan or Kanto. Ryan is eternal, folks. Nothing to see here. Next up is a submission by Akariss. And again, a kind of unit that I feel I don't see enough considering how powerful she is. If I was to like pick a few infantry red swords and like top 3 of like the best in the current game, like Ira is definitely way up there. So her weapon, for those who forgot, is basically slaying to proc off those Regnal Astras almost always. She gets 4 to all stats on a very easy condition. She has damage reduction built into her weapon, and her special cannot be denied in any form, which is absolutely crazy good. So she has everything she needs with Null Follow-Up in B and Mystic Boost Seal to essentially become one of the best units in the game. And considering that, I'm surprised, and like her popularity back in like 2017, I'm surprised I don't see her as often as I should, considering all of those aspects that bring Ira from a non-existent unit basically pre-refined to, in my opinion, one of the best Red Sword infantries. So I'm sure that Akariss here has a lot of success with that, but a reminder that Ira does exist and she's very good, and I honestly don't even think you need to like full invest into her just because she has so many things going for her. It's not like a damage reduction one-off, it's literally as long as your foe is above 75% HP, 15 flowers, 4 to all stats. There's just so much going for Ira that I can't believe that She's not as common as I thought she once would be when that refine did happen months ago, or even more than months ago. It's been a while. Next submission is a Ishtar, which makes sense considering we saw Reinhardt. Weapon is a little bit better than Dire Thunder, considering it's -2 speed. Submission by Juan Solo. A offense-oriented Ishtar, mind you, which is something you might not see that often, but a solid thing to consider because dancers in general don't engage in combat all too much and usually play a very supportive role. Ishtar herself is actually a solid thing to consider for something like offense because of her ability to actually provide offensive pressure, and that's through her quad effect. When I have one myself. When I use her in Arena Assault as a one-off, she tends to actually carry some games even as a dancer, and that offensive power is really useful for carrying your games. I can imagine that's basically what Juan Solo here is saying by his submission of Ishtar. Combined with air orders and aerobatics, you have yourself a very flexible, high mobility, powerful support unit. Final submission of today's video, and again, there will be more in the future. If you guys also want to engage in this, Patreon, Discord, Connect, and join the community, you guys can definitely reach out to me on this sort of thing with your submissions, and I want to definitely cover more. But again, this video would be really long if you made it this far. So we have a defense-oriented Sylvain, and again, like this is why I love these, like this sort of video, because it's just like units that I forget existed or just I felt like were not that relevant. But Sylvain is basically your green cav, and I use one myself, Cecilia of course, but his stat spread is very nice for a green tone cav because it's more defense oriented. And I feel like defense is more important than res nowadays, because a lot of the tanks that you'll find people play into your defense usually hit melee physical, usually. So because of that, Sylvain's stat spread is actually pretty solid and dumped into attack speed and defense, and makes him pretty good as an option. I'm pretty sure this has some quite good success. I have to rely on stuff like TA and stuff like air speed defense, unlike let's say Cecilia, to make things work. In contrast, this has ARD speed res to bump up his res stat to a serviceable level, but uses defense otherwise. So actually quite budget friendly instead of having to use something like speed defense or even ARD AD. So thank you guys for watching if you made it this far into the video. I hope you did enjoy this different type of video where I wanted to appreciate some of the submissions that my community has given out to me. There are so many that I could seriously not go through them. I wish I could, but this did take quite a while to like compile and, you know, give credit to people who did submit this to me. And there's definitely gonna be more in the future. I'm looking to do this at least once a month, but even more, I guess, if there's just an overwhelming response to it. Hopefully you guys did learn something from this. If you haven't, if you have like your own unit that you were, like you saw here and you were thinking about like, oh, maybe I should invest in this, or if you're afraid of investing into your favorites, don't be, because obviously a lot of people still do, and there's just a lot of characters that have a lot of potential. Don't be afraid. Let me know in the comments below who you use or who you're really proud of as a unit, and of course, smash the like button. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Much love. Peace.
It's over.